Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Firstly, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of all lands of Australia, particularly the Gadigal of the Eora Nation of Sydney and the Darug and the Gundungurra nations of the lands in which I live and work and am speaking from today. I pay my respects to elders and generations both past, present and emerging. I would like to thank Japan Foundation Sydney for their generous support of this project and the forthcoming publication, as well as my thanks to 4A Centre for Contemporary Asian Art, Professor Paul Gladston, UNSW Art and Design, and Tokyo University of the Arts for making this talk and project possible. Also, a warm welcome to our distinguished guests, Professor and Curator Yuko Hasegawa and artist, writer and translator Yuki Okumura. Welcome to Australia. What you see in front of you on the screen is a research map. Mapping art practice in Japanese, Nihongo. I created this map as a preparation for my survival aesthetics research and also a way to study a comparison between international art English and Japanese art language. It was the basis for formulating a subjective thesis. Although the project is introduced as a term in the 1990s to describe a more embedded and socially politically aware mode of artistic practice, it is equally a survival strategy for creative individuals under the uncertain labour conditions of neoliberalism. Claire Bishop, Artificial Hells, 2012. So how did survival aesthetics begin? Among the key topics addressed in survival aesthetics research interview series is the exhibition as a critical form, but that doubled with a critique of exhibitions and social connection as artist survival strategy. This topic was also prompted by trends in institutional critique and the acceptance that both individual and collective institutional contemporary art practice is embedded and bound within a system of cyclic reproduction and referential critique. Since the transition of the post-war era from the modernist paradigm to postmodernism, the art world has become a place of increasingly complex relations. In an Asia-Pacific context where it is argued that Euro-American perspectives are no longer valid as a formula for evaluating the art of this region, Ruben Kihan, ATP, 2014, from his to unravel readings of history, how do we then consider artworks that still reference these discourses? Although Australia and New Zealand are considered part of the Asia-Pacific region, Euro-American perspectives are still heavily influential. Taking this into account, this project has been affected in both its construction and its eventual reception by its complex position being produced by an Australian in Japan. The critical questions discussed throughout these interviews include: how are artists surviving the ever-shifting context of contemporary art and establishing enduring practices? This in turn leads to other questions regarding the directions of art discourse and its relation to a substantially heterogeneous field of practice. How I arrived in Japan and my relationship to Japan is a long story. However, early on in my undergrad days, in early 2000s, I encountered the work of Gutai, Monoha, and Micropop, and fell in love with the post-war and postmodern Japanese art discourse. I began to use the term survival aesthetics around the time I arrived in Tokyo in 2013 as a researcher on the Monbu Kagakusho Scholarship. My research project was based on the theme of post-painting in Japan, and it was really about me asking the question, how can painting survive after conceptualism and relational aesthetics? I was looking specifically at the Monoha and Micropop movements and the practices of artists who had begun as painters and moved away from the medium towards object-orientated ontologies, documented forms, from Gutai, Shiraga, to Monoha, Liu-fan, Nobu Sekini, Kishio Suga, and instructional performance, such as work by Yoko Ono, Mieko Shiomi, and Fumiko Nakaya. When I arrived in 2013, I was observing a critical moment from the activated object to a more relational post-exhibition, post-311 Fukushima scenario of heightened awareness of socially engaged art practice. So I wanted to ask the artists in my context how their feelings and perceptions of these transitions, about their feelings and perceptions of these transitions. Works in exhibitions such as Out of Doubt, Roppongi Crossing 2013, saw some of these works come to the fore, as well as Toyo Ito's Architectural Pavilion at the Venice 2012 Architectural Biennale, and Koki Tanaka's work, Abstract Speaking, Sharing Uncertainty and Collective Acts, curated by Mika Kuraya, utilizing the same room and materials a year later for the Japanese pavilion in the Venice Biennale 2013. Also works such as Tadasu Takamine's Japan Syndrome, Kansai 2011, recently shown in Melbourne, Australia, in the exhibition Concrete Archives, curated by Lisa Radford and Yoni Skas on the 10-year anniversary of Fukushima 2011. No doubt some of these works contained elements of referential critique and implementation of catchphrase terminologies of international art language, contingency and precariousness being highlights of the last decade or so. I wanted to ask practicing artists and curators tough and complicated questions about the atypical strategies that I had perceived as dominant in the kind of Euro-American influenced art practice and education that I'd received and was used to in Australia. One which was heavily based on quotational art and referencing practices, with critical or humorous takes on modern and postmodern art history. I set out on somewhat of a quest to find out, were the artists in my local or immediate environment of Tokyo University of the Arts, colleagues and fellow academics, aware of or testing out these kind of typical postmodern strategies in their work? Was there a similar nod and wink quotational intent to the past and other contemporaries when these artists were making formalist gestures and initiating acts of social or institutional critique? And was historical revisionism held in similar reverent regard? Or was it the irreverence that was the point in these practices I was observing? Nicolas Bourriard's relational aesthetics wasn't even translated into Japanese in 2013, as Yuki Okumura has informed me. There still doesn't exist an official translated copy. For this reason, it is hard to say that Bourriard's ideas were adequately understood by Japanese art students not reading English texts. But if we are to consider that his book is an after-the-fact analysis of the events that spontaneously occurred, then even if his ideas had not penetrated into Japan, there is no reason for us to presume that the relational activities he focused on are unrelated to Japan. In fact, through slightly different and notable activity came into existence in Japan in the 1990s. This was artist-run spaces as typified by Studio Shokuro. The artists in that group utilized a warehouse for their own studios, while also utilizing it temporarily for open studio exhibitions and for exhibition spaces. This type of trend was at the vanguard of today's ideas of post-white cube and post-exhibition, and can be seen as having synchronously occurred at the time. Very in line with groups such as Atelier Ranzan, Yoroshiku, Mume, Statements, XYZ, Super Open Studio Musabi, etc., a decade or so later, who are also interviewed and featured in my book. But on the contrary, perhaps it was that many of these gestures and acts were being produced more intuitively and emerging naturally out of a social need, even if only a need within Japan's own art world. After decades of ambivalence, there were reactive forces against the previous generation of super flat, superficial, cute, aesthetic commercialism. Micropop wasn't portraying the glitz and glam of British sensationalism, however, as a reflection of the Japanese social condition of the 1990s, the lost generation, Ushinawareta Jidai. Perhaps after post-311, it was time for a reply to a decade of popular apathy and quotidian realities. But after seeing a great deal of socially engaged practice after 311, I also questioned how long this rigor of environmental concern and socially engaged art practice would have lasted. By 2018, many artists seemed to tire of these reactivations of the landscape and the people through communally active and participatory communal art festival programming on behalf of curators, universities, art institutions, art centers, and city councils. That is, an excessive focus on distinctive regional problems that possibly hinders artists from becoming involved with the problems we are facing from a global perspective. Okwui Enwiza, the director of Documenta 11 in 2002, pointed out possible ways to approach society and politics. But in the first Echigo Sumari Triennale 2000, curated by Kitagawa Fran, and other regional art festivals such as the Seitochi Triennale, co-established in 2003 by Toyomi Hoshina, that possibility was blurred behind the problems of depopulation and the aging of local residents. But even the Gwangju Biennale 2008, directed by Enwisa, did not expect Japanese artists to commit themselves to problems in society and the world. In contrast to the Echigo Sumari Art Triennale begun in regional North Japan in 2000, commonly called the Daiichi no Geijitsuzai, the Earth Art Festival, the Gwangju Biennale laid down the concept of post-festival in its initial stage. Aside from that difference between the two exhibitions, as Atsushi Sugita recalls in his essay, The Flow Under the Flat in 2013, it could be that Japanese artists were automatically assumed to have a non-political identity when viewed on the level of an individual artist. In any case, their non-political attitude, or the situation in which they are expected to take that attitude, is one of the prominent problems that must be solved in the Japanese contemporary art world. Sugita continues, although unique artistic conditions in Japan were involved, the activities that synchronously occurred in the 1990s are still being developed through their interactions with global trends. Some good examples are the small-scale groups in Japan called Camp and Blandklasse, amongst others. These groups have continually held discussions and performances based on the idea of post-exhibitions, which began to flourish at the beginning of the 2000s. This type of activity is showing signs of a different awareness from the one that brought about a non-political attitude. My main proposition to the trend cycles of contemporary art post-painting, say from 1960s postmodernism to 2000s, was simple. That which I saw as symptomatic of postmodernist 2000 plus practice, which could be seen as operating on three modalities. One, referential critique, that is, reference and reproduction using other works as conceptual defense, conscious or unconscious reappropriation, or making art that looks like art. Two, multiple authorship, collaboration, connections to other artists, group exhibition projects, ARIs, and co-curation. And three, conceptual branding and identity branding, practicing under aesthetic and conceptual cultural terminologies. For example, feminism, minimalism, environmental art, video art, performance art, post-medium, relational aesthetics, etc. In this modality, artists then perform the making of the appropriate or appropriated work to fit the mold of their preferred aesthetic model, or in this case, the institutional commercial branding. Of course, many of these ideas come from early works of Dada, Marvo, New Realism, Situationalist, Fluxus International, Conceptualism, etc. But still, like Rosalind Krauss has said in The Medium Strikes Back, all of this has been said, only no one was listening the first time, so we have to say it again. Easiness or originality is not really the question. A creative act still requires one, as Ulrich Orbst coined, to do it. To go out and do the project, to act, paint, film, and gather people, to perform, communicate, produce, promote, to document and curate, etc. All these things require the act, whether it is a blatant reproduction or a completely new idea. So regardless of medium, approach, or originality, work still requires some initialization on behalf of the artist or the group. And this is a survival aesthetic. With these questions in mind, I began the first interviews in 2016 with other researchers and the technical assistants of the department at Tokyo Gaidai, as you can see in the following slide. After conducting these initial interviews, which were focused on site specificity, I then created a performance on text and language with Korean international artist Yen No. This was performed at Arcus Artist Residency in Moriya, Ibaraki. After these two experiments, I actually began the doctoral project interviews. Firstly, I began this interview with Yuki Okumura, who I met at Statements Gallery in Tokyo. These appear in chronological order and also the same order which they appear in the publication. I then returned to Sydney and I was interviewed by Julie Bacon from UNSW when I created this show at Alaska Projects. After that, I returned to Japan. I conducted an interview with the members of Atelier Ranzan, who were also graduates from Tokyo University of the Arts and Musashino Art University, working with cinematographer Mitsuo Abe, who conducted this interview with me at the project we did at Midori-so Art Space in Tokyo. This interview was with Venezuelan artist who lives and works in Japan for over a decade, Achilles Hadjis. The interview of the exchange exhibition between Yoroshiku Gallery and Mume. Then the interview here with Yuko Hasegawa, where she explained her curatorial concepts. An interview about the statements Artists Run Space with Hirofumi Isoya. An interview with Ruben Kihan on his curatorial practices between Australia, Japan, and based in the Asia Pacific region. My professor, Toyomi Hoshino, his interview on Life is Art. This was conducted with Agatha Goethe Snape in after her solo project at Mori Art Museum. And this interview with Haruko Kumakura, who actually curated Agatha Goethe Snape's exhibition at Mori Art Museum. So after all of these interviews, which can be read in the publication, and were also firstly presented as an initial draft in the PhD graduate exhibition at Tokyo University of the Arts. I'd now like to hand it over to Yuko to talk about her 3 C's of curation, Women of Fluxus, MoMA 2010, and her exhibition book, Japanorama, which was featured at the Pompidou in 2017. Thank you for joining us. After Yuko, we will then hear from Yuki Okumura presenting his practice.
Thank you very much and great introduction, and I'm so glad to participate in this kind of panels. And I just want to introduce my curatorial strategy as a curator from Japan. So I did it in several international biennial, also international exhibition. Today I'm going to give some kind of general direction what I have the aim to be as through my curatorial practice first, and I just explain my kind of exhibitions and introducing Japanese contemporary art in a certain context and a Japanorama. So this is today's topic. So I just starting and I explain my kind of curatorial and concept and 3 M's to 3 C's, because I conceiving these ideas and end of the last century, because I got 2 big commitment is one is Istanbul Biennial, the curators, and the secondary is make a new type of the contemporary museum, 21st century museum, Kanazawa. So these are 2 big commission I just got it in 1999. So I just starting is what is a big shift, what is big change from 20th century to 21st century. I just raise a kind of 3 keyword. One is 3 M's, the man, money, materialism, and the 3 C's is coexistence, collective intelligence, and also consciousness. Because these 3 M's, but led by big capitalism, and also consumerism, also materialism, also a male-centric world is which also conducted by those kind of 3 M's in the 20th century. Because these 3 M's led people's life is very kind of innovative way, and also people enjoy the rich life, also very something they know about what a comfortable life is. But it's a great achievement. But those kind of 3 M's also bring lots of the problem. So that we really kind of facing lots of kind of actual kind of problem how we can survive in the 21st century is. because instead of the 3 M's, I just read the 3 C's as a new keyword. It's conducted in the 21st century. So because we really have to kind of holding the big achievement of 3 M's, but also try to make like a restoration, also, something like make some correction, and also, something like a little kind of adjustment toward survival 21st century. This term is coexistence, and people have to live together, and even if those how we can know others, and also collective intelligence. Collective intelligence, and also very much connected to upcoming internet and ecosystem, so, and also data system. So that is also consciousness. I don't want to use any kind of spiritualism, so-called those kind of term, because consciousness and something materials, and also something about people can share, and something related to, and like a compassion, and also, and like sympathy, something like that. So also it's very much, and action of, and how our brain and mind being together. So this and 3 C's, and working to, and make a soft landing, and 21st century as a survival. And this big shift, and 3 M to 3 C's, and I just started my curatorial works at the beginning of the 21st century. So this is the next slide, please. This 2001 and Istanbul Biennial. This is first time I become a curator and international biennial. I just invited 74 artists, and also Istanbul is a great city, and also located between East and West, also in Europe and Asia, because particularly Bosphorus Strait is very symbolic places, because I was first curators invited by Asian side. So I invited from Asian side. So that's why I was called your first curator from the other side. So what is the other side, the curator from the other side? What we can propose? Because this is Ayayireni as one of the major venues in Istanbul, because Ayayireni has a kind of history, because first is like an Islamic mosque, also before it's like a Christian church. But again, it's they had a lot of kind of destruction, also a lot of economic crash, and the violence happened in these places. But Ayayireni means church of the peace, something like that. So that is I just many kinds of previous curators, and most of them come from Europe, also States. And they made a big kind of installation, like symbolical sculptures installation in these places, because this is the center of the Biennale. But instead of the symbolical the sculptures, I put one platform, and this colored platform is a painting platform, is Michael Lin, because inviting people stay here. Because my concept is like an ego fugal. Ego fugal is like an idea of and we just forget about the human-centric ideas, and also egocentric ideas. We have to think about, through escaping from our ego to just, floating, to flying into the peripheral and others, to sharing those kind of certain kind of spaces with others. This is ideas. I just created this term. This is my creation, ego fugal. So that is, according to this kind of concept, I just make a lot of kind of places the sharing. Also, a lot of kind of the artist, and it's not kind of the, and very much an intentional level of the creation. It's more kind of the, certainty, and more unconscious levels and the creation process. Those kind of artists are invited. But I just used kind of 7 or 8 venues in the city, and so many people just kind of sharing and those kind of experience, and with art audiences, also just kind of people living there, also tourists. It's very mixed. So that is but the second sorry, can you go back to, yeah. I have one episode is because 2001, it's 9/11 happened because those kind of incidents happened, and 10 days before the original schedule's opening, because so many and kind of and rumors and also so-called fake news is happened because we don't have any ideas what happened, what's the kind of truth. So this is a very chaotic situation, and I decided to continue to this progress and to open the exhibition because it's very important to just be together with local students. They just working the voluntary to they just supposed to be to working with those kind of international artists. So they just most of them they just plan to study abroad and Western countries, but all of them as their kinds of travelers canceled because forced to cancel because this is very kind of difficult situation what the Islamic peoples and what kinds of prejudice what the gays to just they suffer it at that time. So I just try to be strong with them. So just encouragement them. So with that reason, I just decided to make this exhibition. はい。ということで、next please. はい。で、second project is, 21st Century Museums Contemporary Kanazawa. I just started as a chief curator from 1999 to working with an architect at Sana and aim to make a kind of open museum, also democratic museum. So this is the main kind of, concept of this museum. The next, please. This museum opened 2004, and whilst I'm working in Istanbul biennial, I made a lot of research. Also, I just also developing my ideas about how we can democratize contemporary art to public. So these are very much kind of horizontal frame and all the kind of transparent glasses, but museum located in the center of the city. It's something like city is a part of the museum. It's a museum part of the city. And also you can look at the different kind of volume of the sticking up and over the big kind of roof. And so this is each kind of 14 galleries and has a different kind of proportion, because this idea is contemporary art has a very much kind of diverse and multiple and medium also characteristic. Each kind of artworks installation has to be more freedom and also more respected. So their independence. So that in a way is I just working with an architect and make 14 different type of the rooms, which is quite new, very experimental, but finally it's very successful. But it's not so easy to kind of young curator doesn't have much experience and to make this using these spaces, because each one is very independent, also very separate. And if a young curator doesn't have experience and they do an exhibition and each has very much dispersed and each was cannot be integrated. So that this museum is need those kind of very, very polyphonic, harmonious, and also inclusive ideas as a very curatorial practice, also curatorial language, also basic idea is. So this is also very much train young curators, and if they make a very fantastic exhibition in here. So that museum is very big success, because I left in 2006, and from this April, I just come back and after 15 years and my commitment in Tokyo. But now it's before pandemic and 2020 and 19, and this museum receiving 2.5 million visitors one day. So it's almost one of the top class and famous successful museum now. So that the question is what the quality of the experience is. So now I really have to thinking about new kind of era and a new kind of status of this museum toward 2024. That is the 20th anniversary of this museum. So this is the next, please. So I just talking about my exhibition Japanorama. I got an invitation from Emma Rabin, and she's director of the Pompidou Mess. And this is a kind of, annex building is it's a mess city. As a main building is Pompidou in Paris, and they are showing a Pompidou collection. Also, they are running great their own kind of original program. So, but when I just get the invitation from Emma, and she said, it's Yuko, and Japan is very interesting country. Also, lots of kind of peculiar, also characteristic, and and art and culture in Japan. But then many kind of French people, also European people, does not so much about those kind of culture and art in the depth. Because, for instance, French people say, Japanese culture is represented two words, Zen and kawaii. Because Zen is representative mujirishi and muji shop, and also kawaii and representative by kind of cute, also manga, so comic, also Murakami Nara's painting, something like that. So that you should more kind of digging and and deep understanding and about the Japanese and contemporary art, also related to and subculture, also that the pop culture. This is very important because Japan is a very rich and country is and around. That means the background culture is very rich. Also long history. So how I can integrate and all this kind of and backup culture into this exhibition. And also, and I talked with Emma because this is quite important to and what to focus on and Japanese contemporary art because Pompidou Center in Paris and they make an exhibition at the end of the 80s. That is focus on from 1920s to 1970s. So that is they focusing avant-garde art in Japan because avant-garde is idea is very much kind of influenced by West because they just want to see and kind of paradox of what the differentiation at the Western avant-garde, also Japanese avant-garde, what is common. So this is an exhibition and focused on. But I just focus on 90s and 70s and to present because this is not kind of easy to make this kind of term and because Japan doesn't have any kind of strong kind of context to just as a trajectory to presenting overview this 90 and this kind of almost like 50 years. So in a way, I just try to put together all this and as a model of the islands, as an archipelago, it's a different kind of concept. This is my curatorial kind of strategy, also my curatorial design. So just next, please. Hi. These are, archipelago is a metaphorical an idea of that I just put in several keywords. This keyword I just also discussing with foreign curators who had a Japanese contemporary art exhibition and in the last 20 years. So they just say several interesting kind of, kind of the keyword why they found this Japanese art is interesting. That means, and sometimes this kind of keyword and picking up process is very much kind of, and come from the Western reading. But for me, it's also is very important. I'm going to make an exhibition in France, also Europe. So in a way, we need a certain common ideas, also an open gate, very accessible concept and for the Western people. So that means make a mutual understanding. So in a way, this is an A is strange object and the body and the post-human. It's a body and performativity. And the second is, it's a very special pop, like a new pop. It's a completely different 60s and Western pop in Japan. So C is collaboration, also participation and sharing. So this is D is, it's the most kind of the difficult part because this is my answer is what means kawaii. Kawaii is cute, innocent, and something very childish. But in a way, it's because those kind of kawaii appearance and kawaii expression, behind that, there are very strong politics. This is my ideas, and poetics and also resistance. The E is, and I just focus in Japanese kind of self-documentary, and also photographs and films. Because Japan is quite strong and super subjective photographs, like Araki is Moriyama Daido. Because what is subjectivism? So what is a personal documentaries? Why Japan is so strong? So this is a question of the investigate what means subjectivism in Japan. What a personal means Japan. So this is last part is Japanese more kind of Zen, minimalism, reductionism. So because Japanese people has a very special kind of idea and sensing the material itself without any kinds of projections, authors and intention, and they just bring some strong kind of presence, also appearance of the material itself. It's also come from the connected to Monoha and in 1970s. These are also lots of the minimalism ideas. Minimalism also connected to them. It's come from the 11, also 12th centuries and Japanese aesthetic. So I just put this 6 keyword, and also according to this keyword, I just make an exhibition. So this is so that the reason why this the section and because these 2 floors and because in a very long kind of rectangular form, it's not so easy to use this kind of spaces. But I just working with Sana and they did it and the design of the spaces. I just working with them to the 1 floor is divided into 2, and second floor is divided into 4 like this. Yeah. So this is the entrance. Yeah. The second, please. Because also beforehand, I just want to say why I focus on the 1970s, because 1970s and it's very kind of important years in Japan, because of the Osaka Expo, and also in lots of the 1968, lots of the revolution and the student, also anti and treatment is in the US and also Japan. So this is, and very much kind of revolutionary years and 2 years before, so what happened in Japan. Also, but it's most important things, and this and the 1970s, and it's starting in the post-war time, Japan actually, because in Japan they get more kind of independence, also economically, also culturally, also and their own kinds of and the kind of identity. So in a way, I just focus on this and 1970 is a kind of starting point of this exhibition. So that the first section is kind of bodies and also performativity, and also I just refer to some artworks is before the 1970s, because in the 50s, 60s, very strong movement is like buto and a very original dance and from Hijikata and Tatsumi, and he's a great and buto dancer. He just trained as a kind of Western and dance and company, but then also when he come back to Japan, then he just tried to original kind of movement, original kind of status bodies and Japanese. So also, this is a good eye and people also lots of experimental artworks and like an Akasegawa Genpei's and those kind of the peoples. So this and I just picking up so those kind of several and references, but all those kind of connected to performativity. So I just put sorry, it's a bit too high. Yes, thank you. So this is I just put also including music, also fashion in this exhibition, because it's quite important and those kind of interdisciplinary and presentation as a medium, also style, because Japan is doesn't have so much strong hierarchies and between high and low and culture, because also manga and fashion, architecture, those kind of pop music is almost a horizontal kind of evaluation about in the culture and art. So I just pick up the very important and the player is YMO. YMO just stated techno music, also started connected the human being, the computer. There's a very much important reference. And after them, and many kinds of interesting media artists like Dam Type, also, rhythmatics, and just following them. So that is also Kodani. This is the ideas and mutation, also surrealism. Also Kodai Nahagara, and he's very much postmodern sculptures in the 80s. Also Yuko Morris, and she's kind of making those kind of installation. But this is a kind of her performances without human beings, without any kind of performer as a human, because materials and also an object itself is play the music. This is the ultimate status of the post-human, because to be a non-human body. So this is a part of the kind of strange object and the post-human section. It's very much kind of interesting because you can see Atsuko Tanaka's electric dress and also, Comme des Garçons together. Also this, see, and you can see the, and dress of the whole, and very important and piece is, it's a beggar's look that is called in Paris, and when she just kind of make a fashion show there. So in a way, it's just put together. It's also painting as a whole, and Shuzo Shimamoto. That is, this is kind of ideas of the, and how we can make a kind of constellation, also design of the spaces with artworks. This when you look at this is very beginning of digitalization, but when you look at the center, it's very beautiful kind of collage. That is not by digital computer; it's by hand. They just cut it and all these kind of details just put together to make it a collage. That is amazing. This installation view. This is Akira, and also he's very much also important images and post-human, also dystopias ideas, because Japan is also suffering an atomic bomb. Also many kind of images come from those kind of catastrophe ideas, because Akira is very important, and it's a manga, but for me it's a very important part of the cultural expression and in the context. So and the next one is pop art, because in Japan it's so-called neopop, and it's many kinds of and also stars coming up this 90s, because like Murakami is Naras. But beforehand, it's in the 80s, and it's bubble economies. And also, the very interesting kind of phenomena is so-called pop art in Japan. So I just focus on the kind of different status of the pop and, very uniqueness in Japan. So this next, please. Yeah. Next, please. Sorry, yes. Because for me, it's quite important to introduce what happened in the 80s, also end of the 70s. Because in the 70s, there are many kind of graphic and magazine. So many kinds of designer, also called graphic designer, make a super conceptual artworks, and the design, also visual kind of design. So which is very important. For instance, kind of Tsunehika Kimura, and he just make a lot of caricaturize and politics, also social and problem. So this is very conceptually strong, and also visually very strong. So but also Harumi Yamaguchi is an woman artist. This is most kind of strong kind of feminism movement in a ways, and feminist and the women's become those kind of major scene of the cultural kinds of scenery. That and also Ishioka Eiko, and the woman producer, and also she become a big kind of very important major roles in creating 80s cultures. はい、次お願いします。はい。These are and most more 90s, and everybody knows Takashi Murakami, and also Ayataka knows those kind of Kaikai Kiki and school. Also the connected to those kind of animation, also digital cultures, and also reflected as Unreal Age. Many kinds of, and young fashion designers working for, and those kind of pop culture, also, digital and culture together. So Yayuku Summers, and also it's very important. This is an exhibition views. this Yoko, Tanori Yoko, also this Kojin, this is the scenery. Yeah. Hi. Because I just,
sorry.
戻っていいですか? Can you go back? Can you go back to? Yeah. Because when you look at some walls, there is some kind of, painting is a manga-like. Because some of the, Japanese painters, and also she just applied some images from manga animation. And also, there is some, and also the illustrator, so-called designer, graphic designer, also they just change multiple roles. And sometimes they make they say that this is, I'm painter with images manga, and also I'm kind of graphic designer. But those kind of multiple, and roles they have. So this is a kind of a very typical kind of situation in Japan. Hi. So this it's a quite important part is a collaboration and a participation, sharing. And because sometimes Japanese people is very much kind of very respecting harmony, and also not so much kind of individualistic and strong kind of self and identity. So that means and Japanese people is very much kind of the coherent people and collaborate. So this is impression people has. That means and sometimes it's not so easy to growing and strong kind of artistic expression in Japan. So that means but I just say and it's very important Fluxus movement in the 1960s, because that is the first time that many Japanese contemporary artists participate in international movement. But the Fluxus movement is originally ideas come from Japanese Zen, Suzuki Daisetsu. Suzuki Daisetsu influenced by John Cage. And also, lot of kind of Zen kind of Buddhism, also philosophical ideas, and also sharing by Jody Martinez, also, Yoko Ono, and those kind of also music people. And it's very important to just kind of, those kind of, and Suzuki Daisetsu's ideas and then philosophical ideas, and also, be part of this kind of movement. It's a part of the contemporary art phenomena. So this is the beginning. So that and secondary, it's a kind of collaboration. It's very collaborative works. And also there are many group of the people and make an, and a performance. Also they go into the city. Also they invited the people to be a part of the, and performer. Because for instance, typically is Yoko Ono's instruction art and grapefruits. Also secondary like a play, because there's a group of the people and the artists, but they invited ordinary people to part of their project. Sometimes very playful, sometimes ridiculous, but they enjoy those kind of things very much. So afterwards, particularly the Tohoku Great Earthquake, and many things happened. So many artists and also architects are aware of, how we can collaborate, also how you can contribute, and how can respond to those kind of situations. Because after natural disaster, the people reconsider about the community, also kind of communication in between people through art. And Koki Tanaka is one of the, interesting artist. He changed styles and after, Tohoku Great Earthquake. So in a way, he just invited several 5 pianists to just playing with one kind of piece as a music. So that his ideas and how we can understand other experiences. It's quite an important ideas is. Also, and Toyo Ito's working the project is, Minna no Ie, and people's house. And they just went to, those kind of places where the tsunami earthquake happened. So the people just suffering about this communication because the community is distracted. So they just try to make an attempt, that the public spaces and people can share. So they're listening to people's ideas, not kind of egoistic kind of ideas and original kind of form by an architect. They just working together with kind of people there. So this is a Minna no Ie and the people's house, home for all. So that is a project. So that is this, and I just put together it's a certain kind of very super conceptual part, because normally it's Japanese and the foreign people say it's a criticism, because the Japanese contemporary artists, and they can find so many kinds of, socio-political art, because those kind of, political conceptual art is so weak, and many kinds of my colleagues and curators and just about criticize about that. But again, because I just say, because this is not kind of obvious, not directly and strong and like in a Western context and like a Western expression, but in Japan is has more kinds of indirect and poetic response about their art form. So this but among them but those kind of earthquake and there are many kinds of strong piece, but still very poetic and still very much like involving the people. So this is that I just make a very special section about that. But these are installation of and this part. Very minimum, very simple. This Word document, and they working with the people to make a workshop. They just listen to the people, the request, the desire, this realize and the situation. Yeah. This the very important group of people. Also, this is a fashion. Yeah. So the second is poetics and resistance and poetics and politics. What means kawaii? Because this is most kind of complicated part, and I need really I need more kind of experiment also challenge, because I just say it's the 1920s and there are surrealism and movement, also avant-garde movement and performance, also graphic and also text. It's a marvel. So that is a very interesting group of the people is in the 1920s. Also Koga Harue, and also he's a painter, but he said that he's not, his paintings are not kind of surrealism, not kind of any fantasy dream. It's more real. So that means through his metaphorical images, and he just talking about his criticism about the reality. So that means the real politics in it. So that I just put those kind of Koga's and paintings and into this part, because as a reference, because Harue Koga's piece is much influenced to the Yoshitomo. You can see how much because you can see the in a frame and right hand side and Harue and Koga Harue, because this is 1929. So this is looks like a very surrealistic, dreamy painting, like a very collage painting, and he just put several and like and machine, also kind of sheep, those kind of many menace of the upcoming the war. So that means and very much modern ladies and just raising hand, but also still this looks like totalitarian pose. So in a way, there are many kind of connotation into these paintings. So that Yoshitomo Nara, and she also he's very much influenced by kind of children's book, also imported from Russia, 1920s. That is very interesting. Also, you can tell us and also the could you come back? You can tell you and below because she come from the Okinawa, because this kind of beautiful kimonos pattern is depicted and of the the war, because there is helicopters and also and fighter jet, also parachute soldiers inside. So this is very kind of strong. It's very beautiful, kawaii and cute, and a very so that means that they put on very strong messages. Yeah. Hi. These are poetics resistance, that part. Yeah. The second next page. This and the installation view. Also chimpon. This an installation view. This kind of little kind of girls and committed suicide. Or these young people's paintings. They just sorry, and these are this one is the center of the paintings, and Koji Nakazono. He died and when he was 26 years old. This very recently, and he's shooting and the fires, because the center is one person just to get the fires and he was born. So, but that committed suicide. But it looks like. But the ladies who's shooting an iPhone, something like that. It's just a kind of very dreamy, it's like a part of the children's book, but it's very cruel. These are, the Japanese kimono, you can tell you from Okinawa. The pattern is images come from the soldiers and war. Next one. These are the next, please. Next one. This next one is quite easy to understand because there are many strong and documentaries and photos and also and films in Japan. So that is the first is it's end of the 60s, also beginning 70s, and this is kind of and many kind of strong kind of documentary photos, and they make a very broad and out of focus and a lot of the expression and they just put into. So that afterwards and those kind of emotional subjectivity and also followed by Takashi Honmas and also Rinko Kawaguchi. That is also is quite an interesting kind of and kind of the flow. はい、次お願いします。This it's very kind of strong. Everybody knows about that. So this one, it's because how we can find those kind of scenery from everyday life. Because everyday life is not kind of peaceful and the days and something like nothing happen. Because how we can, how much effort and how much strong kind of life behind this kind of peaceful scenery. So this pictures and talking about that. Also, I just put on cover rice and it's a kind of and but interesting reference how the daily life could be and may become a paint. So this is yeah, this is Rieko Shiga. These are images of this section. Yeah. はい。This is 高橋本間、リエコ氏が。はい。なんかいっぱいあるね、sorry. はい。The last part is the materials in the relations and minimalism. Also, what I say is what the Zen, minimalism and reduction is, because in Japan it's basic philosophy is less is more. So what means less is more? Because French people is they cannot do it, less is more. So that means they put in more and more. So that is their kind of logic. But that's why French people is very much interested in this kind of part. Because also I just also try to make some new interpretation about the mark intervals, something space in between, because what we're going to show it and not kind of a substance object itself and something in between. This is most important part is in Japanese art as their expression. はい。This famous movement is 70s and Monofa, リュウファン、岸尾菅。And afterwards, Sugimoto Hiroshi, and also, Hiroshi Nomura, they're shooting the nature, but it's super minimalized. But they contain a lot of kind of information and, into the, their photos, very minimal, but tons of the information, also noise inside. And so Kohei Nawa, and he just tried to, transformed certain materials into the very abstract and kind of sculptural kind of presentation. But he's a kind of magician dealing with the materials. This is an installation view. Because it's one before. The Kohei now, just sorry, and just show it up and to put it next. Next, please. 違った。Sorry. Could you back to Kohei Nawa's piece? Yes. That's the installation. Sorry. Installation view. Yes. Yes, this one. Yeah. Because the reason why I put Kohei Nawa's piece and end of this exhibition, because this piece connote lots of kind of meanings. And one is this looks like a digital barcode, but also this looks like a black rain. And after atomic bombing and Hiroshima, 1 week and all days and black rains and falling. So this is a very special kind of memories that people has what means black rain. So this Japan is a kind of place as a big experiment, atomic bomb, also big kind of high speed and those kind of commercialized also, lot of kind of, capitalism is yes, growing in the 70s, 80s. Japan is a big experiment and a kind of field of experiment. So in a way, also, this is quite, referring about, American and modernism. It's like Barnett Newman and those kind of contemporary masters. So the Jeep painting. So this is referring. This is a kind of the answer to response to an American formalism. So this is also it's a quite strong statement. Yes, yeah. So this is end of the show. So that is I think this exhibition was very successful, and 100,000 visitors come, and also a lot of kind of nice reviews, and also New York Times, also Figaro magazine, those kind of things. Also, and the catalog was published in French, and that's only French. But recently, and we just make a very kind of smaller size book. It's a publication English and Japanese, because this is quite important in the authors, because Emma Rabin and I wrote about text and wrote the text, but I just invited 11 authors, and they mostly Japanese and one French, but they are they wrote about their own kind of very unique point of view. This is not kind of illustration, not kind of explain about the Japanese art history, which is very important and also interesting book to if someone interested in Japanese culture and contemporary art. Thank you very much.
Yuki, welcome back to our presentation. Actually, okay, cut that. Hi, Yuki, welcome back to our presentation. We're going to continue to listen to you present about some of your practice, and we'll conclude from there. So thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, thank you for having me again. I will, yeah, well, yeah, maybe I just start. Yeah, so I disappear now. Yes. I'm first sharing my screen and then I disappear. So yeah, my name is Yuki Okumura. I'm an artist and a translator between English and Japanese. And for me, my artwork is also like a translation. My work, artistic practice, is basically about how we can kind of free ourselves from our physical body, like physical confinement, limitation. I mean, because we have a body, we are kind of bound to here and now. But I'm trying to find a way, like, to kind of go beyond this. And I use language a lot, especially personal pronouns like I, you, and he, and she, and they, we. And very often I work about, on, and with other artists. And I use their works as like elements of my work, like materials of my work. However, I think my work is a self-portrait of mine in a very peculiar sense. And I do it through others, like I kind of portray myself through others. So yeah, this is my website and this is my name. And so first I want to talk about my project from 2011. which is a film. Oh, this is not. Okay. Maybe I do. Wait, sorry. You can cut it here, and I start now. Okay, this is a project I did in 2011. Here, well, when I was a PhD student at the Tokyo University of the Arts, I invited Chinese Austrian artist Jung Yang, and to give a lecture about his practice in English. And in my film, you only see the interpreter. She was the interpreter translating his English into Japanese consecutively. And his work itself is about, let's say, about identity between different languages and different cultures. So here you see an interpreter talking about self or identity in the state of translation, in a sense. So there's a nested structure here. I mean, here, like, she looks like the artist himself, because she introduced herself as like, my name is Jung Yang, and I was born in Austria, but she's not Jung Yang, she's Noriko Kobayashi, and she's from Japan. So here she kind of surrogates him. Do you say this expression? So after this film, I did a performance about, well, I did a performance with 9 people, 9 actually simultaneous interpreters, but like, it looks like 9 lectures taken at the same time in the same space at different locations. They all start by saying, my name is Yuki Okumura, and then they talk about the work of Japanese artist Onkawara. And slightly differently, because actually they were listening to one same audio file, which is a recording of my lecture about Onkawara, and I gave it in English. So here they they are simultaneously interpreting my words into Japanese. So in a way, like here I was given 9 different bodies and 9 different locations at the same time, which for me kind of corresponds to the practice of Onkawara. And after this, in the same year, well, no, in 2000, yeah, so the film was in 2011, the performance was in 2012, and in the same year, 2012, I made a installation consisting of 4 different video pieces by 4 different artists. And so this entire space was my work, encompassing 4 different pieces by 4 different artists. And what was common between all those works was the fact that I was in charge of the Japanese subtitles. So in all of those videos, you hear English conversations, dialogues, although like all the sounds were turned up, so you kind of couldn't distinguish what were being said. So my subtitles were the only like, how to say, yes, only through my subtitles you could access to the contents of the conversations. So for me, like, I was haunting the entire space because I was kind of governing the entire thing. I was the filter through which everything was being communicated. So in these 3 works, I was dealing with translation quite pretty literally, you know. But after this, my practice kind of shifted to more to like working on art history, and also because for me translation is a way to become someone else, as I said. So after these projects, I began to use other ways than literal translation. I would use more the overlaps between myself and other artists in terms of both work and life. All right. Yeah, so this is a project I did in 2013 about a Japanese artist called Hisachika Takahashi in Antwerp and Brussels in Belgium. And there was a gallery in Antwerp in the late 60s and early 70s called Wide White Space. Kind of really famous and almost legendary gallery in the in terms of conceptual art, history of conceptual art and contemporary art. I had a book. I was looking at the book about the activity of this gallery, and almost all the artists documented in the book are now famous and established. And however, there was only one artist I didn't know, and no one knew, which was a Japanese artist, obviously Hisachika Takahashi. The information in the book, there were no photos of his work in the book, but only the list of his works exhibited in his solo show at the gallery in 1967, all untitled and oil on canvas. So I went to see, I was very curious, and I went to see one of the co-directors of the gallery, Annie Dedecker, and she told me, I asked her, do you have photos of his paintings? Because I'm so curious. But then she said, no, there are no photos because we didn't take photos of the paintings. Paintings were so colorful, so we didn't want to make black and white photos. And at that time, color photos were very expensive. That's why we didn't take photos. However, we still have the real paintings. We still have the paintings themselves in the storage because the artist didn't come to pick them up. Yeah, so these are the paintings that she just showed me, and I was kind of really amazed and impressed by the paintings themselves. Although, I didn't know how to relate myself to them. And then after some time, I managed to locate the artist, and he was in Paris. This is Hisachika Takahashi. And we talked. He told me about many stories about his life. And what I found out, what he told me was that he was assistant to Lucio Fontana in Italy at that time. And then after that, he went to New York and he became assistant to Robert Rauschenberg. And then working for him for 40 years. More or less, until Rauschenberg passed away. So, that's why Hisachika Takahashi, his work kind of faded away from the visibility of art history. That's why I didn't know him. And then he told me, all his works, all the works by Takahashi have been about collaboration and memory. And one such work he did in, I think, 1971 is this one called From Memory, Draw a Map of the United States. And here he asked his friends and kind of colleagues and the artists he admired in New York, because he was in New York to assist Rauschenberg. He asked 22 artists to draw a map of the United States only from their memory. Like this is by Joseph Kossuth. Maybe you see his style, and Jasper Jones, So this is Gordon Matt Clark. So for him, this entire set of 22 drawings is the work of his. Each drawing is a work by the artist, but the entire suit is his work. And I thought, oh, wow, like we are doing something similar, because also in my work, in many of my works, I use other artists' works or life stories as elements or materials. So this is, so through this, I kind of found a way to relate myself to his practice. And even more, he said the drawings, the paintings, the pattern paintings were also a way for him to collaborate, not with people, but with rollers. Rollers are popular at that time with like embossed patterns. Patterns were embossed on the surface of those rollers. So if you apply paint on it, you can transfer the pattern onto your wall. Like, yes, actually it was to decorate your wall. Like instead of putting wallpaper, you would do this. And so like this, he was using this tool for his painting. So it wasn't quite his work how to say it? So it was a collaboration, literally, for between him and the roller. And also he said it was about the memory of the roller, each roller he used. So like, I thought like, for me, those paintings looked just like plain abstract paintings, but now I know how they are kind of linked to my practice. So I was kind of encouraged to work on this body of works. So what I did was just simply restaging the exhibition using those paintings exhibited in the original show. And I kind of reconstructed the show in Brussels at the Wheels Art Center, where I was a resident, artist in residence. And of course, it was not, sorry, I said reconstruction, but it wasn't quite reconstruction, because Hisachika didn't remember exactly what the show was like. He came and he installed those pieces here, but as a new iteration. So for me, it was more like I made the exhibition tour to a new location after 45 years beyond time, reactivate the show in a way. And at the same time, so I was like a curator here, and it was based on my sense of identification or identicality between my practice and his practice, and also my life and his life, because he was new to Europe at that time. But at the same time, it was for me, I made this show in a way in order to take photos, in order to finally document the exhibition, to document the paintings. And these photos were, I consider these photos as my work. The exhibition was curated. I was a curator, but the exhibition was his exhibition, and the paintings were his paintings. But the documentation photos created newly became my work, and I showed those photos at Mori Art Museum in Tokyo in the same year. Kind of trying to reconstruct the original locations, positions of the paintings in the Brussels show loosely through the photos. And each photo was as big as the small painting in the show. All right. After this, when I was looking for him, simultaneously there was another person looking for him, and it was Daniel Berman, a curator, at that time working for Carnegie International in the States, and he put a post on the blog of the Carnegie International asking people like, who is Hisachika Takahashi? Because he found his work in a catalog of an old exhibition from 1973 in Paris, and he was very interested in the artist in the work, and but as just like me, he didn't know, and he wanted to know who Hisachika Takahashi was. So I went to meet him, Daniel, in Switzerland. At that time, he had become the director of I think Kunsthalle Zurich. So I went to see him there, saying, "I am Hisachika Takahashi. You can ask me, you can interview me to get to know who I am." And my how to say reasoning behind this was that Hisachika had repeatedly told me same stories about his life and work. So I kind of memorized many details of his work and life. So if the sameness of memory defines the sameness of persons, you could say that I was him partly. I'm still him because I still have the memory. And at the same time, so this was like my homage to his practice as well, because this is my way to work on memory and collaboration, because I collaborate with the curator, Daniel. Of course, Hisachika knew this, and he approved this, and he was very happy. Although he criticized me for my wrong memory, a few wrong episodes, wrong details, according to him. And with this video as one of the centerpieces, I had a I had an exhibition at a space run by Hermes in Tokyo in 2016, and the video is here. It was a show about him, about Hisachika Takahashi, about who he is. Like we showed his pieces, old pieces and new pieces, and also my pieces about him, about his work and about his life. So the entire show revolves around Hisachika Takahashi. And my video was like, in a way, again, haunting the entire space, because I explain almost all the works by Hisachika Takahashi exhibited in the show. And, how to say, my interview, the video where I'm interviewed as Hisachika is like, kind of like, I try to play with a kind of, like especially in Japan, when you go to retrospective shows at museums, you see such a video in which the artist is interviewed and they, explain their work and their life. I kind of mimicked it I think to blur the boundary between who I am and who he is. And the other centerpiece of the show was the map project. So we could show all those map drawings, like an exhibition inside an exhibition. And some people actually thought I made up Hisachika Takahashi. They thought it was my invention. And if so, it means that I also did all those drawings, like pretending each was painted by one of those art historically important artists. So I thought it was very, very funny. And after this, let me talk about two more projects. After this, in 2017, I made a film about Gordon Matta Clark, the American artist. Okay. It was again a film. Well, I filmed this in Antwerp because Gordon is an important figure in Antwerp art scene. In 1977, this guy, Bex, he invited Gordon to come to Antwerp to work on a major project called Office Baroque. Gordon made lots of cuts inside a big building, just like his other projects. And but the next year, he died because of cancer. And Flor, this guy, he wanted to preserve the building. Because this is the work, this is the building, because that was the only, the last work remaining in the world, last so-called an architecture project by Gordon, because he was usually working in the building, in some buildings that would be demolished. That's why he had freedom to make cuts. So all the other projects he did were not existing anymore. So Frobex wanted to preserve this as his last work. And he asked many artists all around the world to donate a piece or two to do an auction with, selling those works to get money to preserve the building. So many artists responded and many works came to Antwerp. However, the building was demolished before the auction could happen by the real estate company without a preliminary notice. So they were disappointed. However, Flor still, I forgot to say, the original idea was not just to preserve the building, but also to build a museum of contemporary art, which was not existing in Antwerp yet. So they wanted to build a museum next to the work by Gordon. And on each floor, people could go into Gordon's piece from the museum building. That was the idea. So now that the building was demolished, Flo and his friends wanted to at least build the museum with those works they couldn't put on the auction as the founding collection. And this museum is called Muka, and it still exists in Antwerp. It's a very big contemporary art museum. And this story is really famous and everyone knows in Antwerp. So I was very interested in kind of working on this, but I didn't know how. However, actually through Satsuka Takahashi, who was a close friend to Gordon in New York, I got to know that fact that Gordon had a brother, actually twin brother, older than him. I don't know how many seconds older, but anyway, his brother committed suicide 1 year before his own death, jumping from their apartment in New York. And I was, when Satsuka told me about this, I was like, wow, because I had been already thinking, oh, maybe I could be Gordon Matt Clark's reincarnation, because I was born in the same year in which Gordon died, in 1978. And now with this fact, I was like, oh, I felt it would be more probable, because I also had a brother who committed suicide by jumping down from his apartment when he was 19, I was 16. So then I thought, okay, even though everyone knows this story in Antwerp, there's only one person who could never know this, which is Gordon himself, because he died, because he was dead already. So here in this film, you see me kind of reuniting with Flor as Gordon's reincarnation, or simply as Gordon. Here I ask him, what happened to my work after I died? and he talks the entire story, about the entire story to me. But our conversation also covers different topics such as friendship, brotherhood, overlaps of lives, and this film also discovers a lot of almost miraculous coincidences all around this story. And here in the film, I also talk about my brother a little bit. But you don't know if I talk about my brother or if I talk about Gordon's brother. It's kind of all overlapped, all mixed. And my latest project, which I made in 2019, is about Onkawara and Stanley Brown. Onkawara is a Japanese artist who lived in New York, working on the most famous, I think, series he did is called Today, in which he painted the date of the very day. Not every day, but quite often. And he did this for 45 years or something. And Stanley was a Suriname-born Dutch artist. He was more, if Kawara was working on time, Stanley was working on space. But both working through their own body to measure time and space. And in his case, he kind of counts how many steps he makes each day, and also he measures his own foot, and he makes a ruler based on his own foot or his elbow, stuff like that. And their ages were similar, and they both died at 81. And the most interesting and important commonality between them is that they both didn't present themselves to the public for nearly 4 decades or so. There are some photos there are some photos of them when they were young, but like since 60s, and in the case of Stanley from the 70s, there are no photos of their faces, no interview, no nothing. So my fantasy was like they could have been one and the same person because their work so similar. They both are, working in the domain of conceptual art. Similar work. They both are mysterious. You don't know how they look. So in this film, I interviewed 9 people. These people, each of whom had personal interactions with both artists, not just one of them, but both artists. And I asked them to share with me their memory, their recollection, their stories, episodes with both artists. And there was one instruction I gave to them, which was, please don't call their names. Please don't say Onkawara, please don't say Stanley Brown. Only refer them as him. Only refer them as him. So in this film, you see 9 people talking about him. And this him, of course, looks like one person, one man, but in fact, it's a man who is half Onkawara, half Stanley Brown. So in this film, I kind of embody my fantasy through the pronoun him, and also through those people's first-hand memories, experiences. It's quite long, 2 hours. From the moment they met both artists to the moment when they got to know about their passing. Like this, this is the end of the film. like this, I think my practice, my projects have been always about interconnectedness between different individuals, between different bodies, beyond self and other, through various frameworks like shared memory, reincarnation, multiple names, stuff like that. And speaking about artistic branding, I remember Jesse was talking about it in our original panel, I guess. Speaking about it, because I mean, some people think I work this way out of some strategical intention. I work on, or I work with famous artists or artists linked to already established art history. But for me, it's not in order to connect myself to the establishment of art, but rather it's for me more personal, because I'm an artist and I'm interested in other artists, and I'm an artist who is quite interested in the idea of self-identity, individuality. So I'm also curious about other artists who work on the same issues. And so through my projects, I think you see it, but my gestures, how I work on those artists, kind of portrays who I am. Oh, and also, I like how to, and also, some people also criticize me. Why do you work only about art, only about art world, or only about art institution? And I think, one answer would be like, because I'm an artist, but also another answer is like, I think art is really interesting because, like when you see a painting by Picasso, you call it a Picasso. When there are two paintings by Picasso, you say, oh, there are two Picassos. So this means actually each work of art by one artist kind of you call it substitutes, surrogates the artist himself, herself. This, Picasso is here, Picasso is there at the same time. One Picasso is in Japan in this museum, one Picasso is in Australia in this museum. This is impossible if, how to say, normally it's impossible when you consider human body as a person, only human body as a person. But each work of art is like a person in a way, in this sense, through this conventional, how do you call it? Convention of conventional terminology, vocabulary of art institution, art system.
That's, a great scope of your practice there, Yuki. Thanks so much. And many of the topics, like the complexities of, making art about art, and the kind of the way that we weave references between different points of history and different people in art, Yuki and I discuss at length in the interview. And although I think in this presentation, Yuki, you're able to unravel some of the mysteries behind those artworks and those projects that you created.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there's still, I think there's always going to be more mysterious questions behind all of those projects. And every time I revisit those projects, there's another clue, It's almost like, and those projects very effectively unravel a kind of a string of clues, which I really was, when I first encountered your work, that really excited me, and then here we are today talking about it.
Thank you. Happy to hear that.